Alright, so I'm pretty sure most of the comments on this video are going to be from guys saying, "No, I'm not scared of that. You're full of shit. You don't know what you're talking about." And I'm going to say to you, that is your fear talking, my friend. That's actually not the truth. So stick with me if you want to and see if you actually can admit that maybe you have some of these fears as well. Yes, I am wearing shorts with a business shirt. Don't judge me. You know damn well you do the same thing. Why are men so scared to admit that they're scared? Have you ever thought about that? It's interesting, right? Generally speaking, if you ask a man what they're scared of, they either have no idea or they won't admit that they're scared of something. And I think it's a societal reason. I think it's something where we're not supposed to act like we don't know what we're doing, we don't have our shit together, we're not scared of anything, because that would show that we're weak or we're not manly. And so creating a video about what men fear, especially in their 30s, I think is kind of cavalier and will probably get a lot of pushback, but who cares? I think it's important to talk about and to admit so that you can move past those fears in your own way. Now, the basis for this video today comes from a book called I Don't Want to Talk About It by Terrence, and it's probably one of the most real books I've read about men and the way we feel and the things we need to confront in our lives. A lot of the book deals with depression, so if you are someone who is dealing with that, I'd really recommend checking it out. But it can also just be a great read for any man who's willing to confront some of his demons and to focus on the fears that are maybe buried down deep inside of your psyche. So thank you to Terrence for writing such an amazing book. I really recommend it. Let's get into the 5 fears. Fear number 1 is the fear of not fitting in. Now, you might think that at the age of 30, most men would be over the idea of having to fit into a social group or to be accepted by their peers, but the truth is it actually gets stronger as you get older. Most of us are very social creatures. We want to be loved, we want to be respected, we want to be revered, we want to fit into a social culture of some type. And the fear of not fitting in, I think, starts to get very strong in our 30s for men because we see all of our friends starting to change. A lot of us are getting married, a lot of us are getting into more serious careers, a lot of us are starting to buy homes or to do things that are more serious and settling down. And this is kind of scary, right? Because if we don't do these things as well, are we still going to fit into the social norms? Are we still going to be accepted and acknowledged by our friends? I'll be honest, one of the reasons I got married when I was in my late 20s was because all my friends were doing it. Now, that was a very bad idea, and it was one of the reasons why I got divorced in my mid-30s, was because I did something to fit in with the social norms instead of actually thinking whether it was something I wanted to do. So I would encourage you to think, are you fearful that you're not fitting in with your friends or your social group? And is it actually putting you at risk of living a life that isn't really what you want to live? The second fear is the fear of not standing out. Now, you might say, what the hell, man? You just said that we fear not fitting in and now we fear not standing out. What does that mean? Well, yes, you might notice that a lot of life is a dichotomy. It's a oxymoron. It's the reverse things happening at the same time. And I think this is very true in our 30s, where on the one hand, fine, we want to fit in, we want to socialize with people, we want to be accepted, but we also want to be unique and individual and different. This is a societal thing. It's something where we're supposed to be a rugged individual, especially for men, this idea of the entrepreneur, the maverick, the person who's changing the world in some way. It's very seductive, it's very enticing, and it makes us think, well, I need to be like that as well. Men are very susceptible to this, especially when it comes to money and careers and women and all the different things in their life that they think will make them stand out, but actually make them miserable. And I think really you have to look at what is the motivation underneath your drive, and is it actually a healthy one? The third fear that most men have in their 30s is the fear of being alone. Now, how is this different from the fear of not fitting in? Well, the fear of being alone is specifically around relationships. And very often we'll look at our friends who have a girlfriend or a fiance or are getting married or whatever, and we'll think, man, I wish I had that for myself. We look at their life and we kind of covet it. And also we have a fear that maybe I won't find that person for myself. Now, I know for some men this is a huge problem because they're terrified of rejection. They don't know how to date. They don't know how to actually talk to women. And for them, this fear of being alone is kind of pushing against the other side, which is the fear of being rejected. And really, you have to be honest about both those fears and realize they might be driving you from different places. The fear of being alone, which I've talked about in other videos, very often will lead you into bad relationships that you probably shouldn't be in. This is a real problem that happens in your 30s, where you tend to pick someone who you think is okay for you, but isn't really making your life better in many ways. They're not really compatible with you. And so you end up compromising a lot of things in your life just so that you're not alone. And this can be a risk, my friends. So I would encourage you to think about,
are you being driven by the fear of being alone? Is it causing you to be in relationships, whether it is friendships or whether it is romantic relationships, that aren't really serving you or the other person? And should you move on from them and just confront this fear until you find the right person? The fourth fear is the fear of being tied down. Now, this is again the opposite of the fear of being alone, and this is one that a lot of men, especially in their 30s and onwards, deal with. A lot of people will admit that they have a fear of commitment or a fear of being in a long-term relationship because they look at their friends who have this in their life and they realize, wow, their lifestyle has changed. If you've been a single man for a long time or a bachelor, you probably know the difference between you and your married or your coupled up friends. So the fear of being tied down is a huge one, and it's definitely one that I had to deal with a lot in my life, and realize that being in a committed relationship doesn't necessarily mean giving up who you are if you are with the right person. But if you get into relationships where you feel trapped or you feel like you can't be yourself, then that fear is very valid. So the fear of being tied down, I think, is one that every man deals with at some point in their life, but it's good to be honest with yourself if you are feeling it, and to realize that the fear of being tied down is a real thing that can drive your behavior. And the fifth fear is the fear of insignificance. Now, this one goes a little bit deeper than the others because this really has to do with an existential part of life. What is your life about, and what's your legacy going to be, and how do you impact the world? And I think these are important things for you to consider, especially in your 30s as a man. What is your life really about? In future videos, we'll definitely talk more about finding your purpose and finding meaning in your life, but it's important just to realize that maybe you do at some level have a fear of being insignificant or not doing something important with your life. If that's the case, that is actually a good thing because it's driving you to do something worthwhile and meaningful with your life. If you're struggling with the fear of insignificance, I would strongly recommend reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, probably one of the most profound books in the world that you can read about this topic, and it will really change your perspective on what it means to live a life of worthwhile pursuits, to do something of significance. Just read that book and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. This fear of insignificance, again, I think it's something that a lot of men deal with, especially in our 30s and 40s and beyond, and we have to confront it. We have to realize that it's part of who we are, and we have to use it to drive us to live a better, more meaningful, fulfilling life. So those 5 fears are ones that I know have driven a lot of my behavior, especially in my 30s, mid-30s, and into my 40s. As time has gone on, I've learned to admit them, to confront them, and to confide in other men about having these fears. I found that they're pretty common. A lot of men suffer with the same fears in their life, and they suffer alone. The more you realize these fears are here, I think the more likely you are to actually move past them and to live a fulfilling, meaningful life on your own terms. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.